Dennis Lehane from Blackbird, Liz Feldman from Dead to Me, Carlton Cuse, 5 Days at Memorial, and Steve Levitan from the Hulu show Reboot. Thank you so much for doing this, all of you. Great shows. I want to start here. You've all had unique experiences ending your shows, or a show, or Liz, we were talking about earlier, Dead to Me's final season, and Dennis, you obviously Blackbird, and Carlton with Lost, and 5 Days of Memorial, and Steve with Modern Family. How do you approach ending a series, and what's like the best lesson you've learned having done it now or in the past? I guess we'll start with Dennis, since we left off with you first, but go ahead. How about you?
Well, I don't feel I can talk at the degree that these guys can, because I did a limited 6-episode, I'm out. It's arguably long form movie. So I feel like I'm not the guy to answer this question.
That's fine. Liz, how about you?
I think there's some existential terror involved in thinking about how to end a series. Like there's a lot of pressure. It's that mix of wanting to kind of get it right, but what does that even really mean? Because you're the one that's deciding what is right. But you just want to leave the audience satisfied on some level. You want to make it feel like it's the show, but the end of the show. And it's, especially on a show like Dead to Me, which is so propulsive and, riddled with twists and cliffhangers and all that, I just felt like, geez, how do you put a stop to that? So, hopefully when you watch the finale, you'll see sort of, I don't know, the balance that I came up with, but it's really, really hard. And I think also because you have your own emotions mixed up with it. It means that you're ending this job, these relationships, the story, hopefully, you love writing for these characters, which I do. And, so it's a lot of different feelings at once, but mostly it's just a lot of pressure.
Carlton, how about you?
Well, it was certainly a lot better ending 5 Days of Memorial than ending Lost. Let me put it that way. I think I loved doing 5 Days of Memorial because it was the first time I had done a limited where you went narratively from A to Z in 8 hours. And that was a really kind of intoxicating experience, because I am more used to the sort of longer form narrative. I mean, Lost was 121 episodes. I made a network show that was about the same length, and even like a cable show like Bates Motel was 50 episodes. And so just doing 8 episodes was great, and really the propulsion and having a very clear sense almost from the beginning of where we were going was very different than writing a network show, because when you're writing or let's just say a long form television show in the era we live in now, where you're exploring, the thing is evolving creatively. I think if you're a good showrunner, you're sort of listening to your show and you're following your show where it wants to go. And then at some point you just have to stop. And that's a hard thing to do. Whereas when you're doing a limited and it's prescribed turf, it felt a lot easier.
Great. Steve, how about yourself?
It's a very tricky thing. Like, it's so tricky that, even on, like, for example, in Modern Family, there were 2 of us running the show and we had very different ideas about the ending. And so when you're fighting it out at that level, you realize, there's so much at stake and everybody has a strong point of view about it. And I don't know if there's just, it's a miracle when a show gets good. Any show, and it's another miracle when a show ends in a way where everybody is completely, utterly satisfied. I think back on that, famous Newhart ending that in the comedy world, some consider the greatest series ending of all time. And I think about that in hindsight, it is, but at the time there must have been unbelievable debate about that, are we taking our show and like basically denigrating it and calling it a little dream sequence, or is this like such a device that people will that's all they're going to remember or whatever. But it's something that is etched in our brains now in the comedy world as the gold standard, and it's so different. So I just think it's very hard to end one. If for me, would be about sort of capturing whatever emotions, whatever little small emotion that you wanted to capture in the beginning, what you wanted to say. If you can find a new way to kind of say that and wrap it up, just a small feeling, that is about as good as one can hope.
Yeah, you mentioned Newhart. I mean, Dennis, this would be one maybe you could answer too. Like, what about the favorite series finale that you've gotten to watch? You could pick something you've worked on, honestly, all of you, if you wanted.
Oh,
but
no,
just in general.
I think there's when you're talking about sticking the landing, I mean, Breaking Bad. I think Mary Tyler Moore, that last episode where she goes and she turns out the light switch. I mean, you never forget it, I gotta say, I'm not saying this.
MASH. Sorry.
I don't know. I got a weird relationship with MASH.
Okay, sorry.
I don't get into too much, but I would also say, look, I know this sounds like I'm playing to the crowd, but the only ending I've ever wept at was the ending of Lost. Like, I was in a hotel room in upstate New York. I can remember every single thing about it, and I was just like copious. Like, it was like I'd gone through the marathon. And it was such a perfect ending. I mean, it stuck the ending, it stuck the landing. So, and we were very adamant about that when we did this. It was, we want to stick the landing. Like, we want to go out, and we cut a scene to this day. It's Taran's best performance in the entire show. We cut because it wasn't sticking the landing. It wasn't bringing us all the way home. It was good, but it was a little bit victory lappy. That feeling like the end of the Lord of the Rings, should have been 2 hours and 50 minutes, but it's 3 hours and 20 because it does a massive victory lap. We were doing a victory lap, and I was just like, it's a beautiful scene, but we got to cut it. And Taran still won't, I don't think he'll ever forgive me for it. It's such a beautiful performance.
I would also add,
yeah.
I would add that 6 Feet Under had a great ending that I thought about a lot. I thought about that a lot as I was ending Dead to Me.
That's interesting. Yeah. Carlton, how about you? I agree with Dennis.
For me, The Sopranos, I love The Sopranos ending. I mean, I literally, I got a full body tingle when that thing happened, and we just the next day, and we were like, holy shit. That just has incredible resonance for me. I just thought it was so ballsy and awesome and really unexpected in a great way.
When we saw the ending of The Sopranos, it was funny. There was 3 writers and 4 non-writers in the room, and all the 3 writers looked at each other with such elation when that thing went live. Like, you're like, that's what you're after, like, people will be talking about this for 30 years. Who cares if they don't like it? They'll be talking about it, It's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And like you mentioned, all these are incredibly memorable endings. And to do that, I think, is really great. You're all showrunners, obviously. What's the most difficult part of this being a showrunner for you guys? Because you obviously have to balance so much of the creative aspect and driving the creative force behind the show, but also like managerial stuff, I would imagine, all these different things, and you have to balance. And how do you not lose sight of the creative part of it and making sure you're doing the best for the show from a narrative standpoint, I guess? Steve, we could start with you and go back because we didn't start with you last time. But
for me, there's nothing harder. For the hardest part of the job is just it's story breaking. I always think about that. I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but there's a story I've heard of these 2 old screenwriters who were talking, and he says one of them says, how's your new screenplay going? He goes, well, I just finished the outline and I'm about to start the first draft, so I'm 95% done. And that's the way I think about it. It's like when you break a story and it works and it's going to work, that's gold to me. Like that, wow, what a relief. Because the drafts will be easier, the jokes, the comedy will come easier, and you're following something you care about. So I just think there's nothing, to me, there's not even a close second the hardest part of that job is just making sure that the stories you are telling are worth doing so.
Yeah. Carlton, how about you?
I mean, I completely agree with Steve. So in order to say something slightly different, I'll sort of modify it into the most difficult part of the job might be just like dealing with notes. Like, and it's just the, the trying to kind of sort of be collaborative and maintain an open mind about what people think, but at the same time, really holding fast to one's vision. And I think particularly in the tentative early parts of development, it's a hard thing. And I think writers struggle with that a lot. I get, and I've taught a lot in the showrunner training program. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of questions that emerging showrunners have about the notes process, and just trying to kind of deftly walk the line of not being an asshole, but at the same time being clear and sticking to your vision while at the same time being responsive and all that. That's the part I would say it's hardest and that I enjoy it the least. I mean, I think what Steve said is right. I mean, story breaking is everything, but I mean, there's such joy in it too. It is hard, but like when you get it right, it's just so you get to the end of an episode and you figured it out, and there's just no better feeling.
You don't get that same kind of joy from dealing with notes, Carlton?
Liz, how about you?
Well, I'm going to agree with both guys and say, yes. I mean, of course, it's extremely hard to break story, especially when you're doing the streaming model and you're breaking the entire season at once, and then having to present the entire season arc to, the powers that be. And, you don't really have it all figured out at that point, but you're, hoping at least that some of these story points land. And it's, there's nothing more terrifying than looking at a blank, whiteboard. And it feels like an Everest level climb. I would also say, to your point, is the managerial aspect can get a little overwhelming when you're in production and you're essentially doing 11 jobs in one, and you're spinning lots of plates. And, I say that it sort of prepared me for motherhood, because it felt, there are moments, and it's really everybody just trying to do their job in the best way possible. But, there are hours that go by on set, and it just is like, hey, Liz, hey, Liz, we have Liz, do you have a second? And I'm like, oh, it's kind of like, mommy. I was like, oh, this is good training. It's good training for having 250 children. But not to say that the people I work with are children, but it's just, there's a lot of demands on you. Yes. And I think, I started to understand why some of previous showrunners I have worked under could be what would be considered like assholes, because it's very easy to slip into, sort of a cranky mode, when you have that much demand on you. So, my sort of goal was always like, I just want to maintain my humanity. I want to be a kind person and actually make that my priority in terms of dealing, with all of these people who are putting 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day in. So, not that it's hard to be a nice person, but after, 12 hours of that, it can be challenging. So I just always have to like sort of set that intention early on. Like I want to lead with love, and I'm going to try to do that as much as I can. And also story breaking.
And Dennis, lastly, you, how about you?
I agree with the story breaking for sure. And then I would say managing. I was very concerned, because I'm not a micromanager. I was very concerned what I was going to be like as a showrunner, soup to nuts. Because when I did Mercedes stuff, when I worked with David Kelly, I didn't run set. I stayed in LA and I ran writers' rooms and I cast and I did all that, but I didn't go to set. So I was a little concerned. I was like, I'm not a micromanager. It's just not my personality. And so what am I? And then I said, well, the smartest thing then would be the same approach I'm taking at casting. Just hire people who are super good at their jobs and pray that you were right, And so I did that, which was great. And still everything went, nuts while we were shooting, no question. But it did help to feel like, okay, at least the people I have are competent, I can put my trust in them. And then I realized as things went really crazy, the technique is very similar to parenting. You come up with performative empathy. It's I don't know how else to put it. You don't actually,
Or empathy, just empathy. No.
no.
It's tough
It's
with kids.
different. You'll see, Liz. You'll see what happens once your kid comes to you and their world is falling apart because somebody drew on their thing with a crayon in their, you gotta act like it's the tragedy of the world, because it's, you gotta care. So it's performative empathy. And I remember having somebody who did something that was completely unacceptable, very Me Too-y, and I couldn't afford to fire this person. I couldn't. I'd been screwed. But at the same time, they couldn't do one more thing, say one more word that was walking down this path that they were walking down. And so I had to have a conversation with them as if I was empathetic, and it worked. When the person walked away, I was like, holy shit, I sold that. When what I wanted to say was, are you out of your mind? What cave did you crawl out of? I wanted to say all those things, but I couldn't. So it was performative empathy. And once I got that, I kind of went down the path with it, and it worked almost every time, except the times it didn't, in which case,
or now as a result of the Zoom when everybody's on to you.
Yeah.
No, never. They'll never
The
be
next
on.
time. No, it's real empathy. It's real empathy.
So no, my
cares about me?
kids know it's performative empathy, but they respect it.
Yeah. How do you know when it's performative? It could be real at that time. You never know, right?
I think sometimes they look at me and they're like, he doesn't give a shit. I mean, I'm taking third grade problems to my daddy.
God.
I don't think he cares, but sticking in there with me.
Well, we have to wrap it up here, but this has been so much fun. Thank you all for doing this. Dennis Lehane, showrunner for Blackbird, Liz Feldman, Dead to Me, Carlton Cuse, 5 Days at Memorial, and Steve Levitan for Reboot. Amazing shows, amazing showrunners. Thank you so much for your time in this conversation.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet you all.